My name is Captain Peter Jensen, though most people just call me Jensen. I've called the sea home for 40 years. Now, as I prepare to hang up my captain's hat and return to solid land for good, I feel it's my duty to leave something behind. Not for my crew, no, most of them already have sea legs, but for the new recruits who will follow. Platform 32 is no place for the reckless or the unprepared, and if my stories can save just one person from making a fatal mistake, I'll consider this guide worth writing. I wasn't always a man of the sea. Once, long ago, I thought a quieter life lay ahead for me. My father was a carpenter, a man who worked with his hands and built things that lasted. I inherited his craftsmanship, but I had no interest in making chairs or mending roofs. I wanted something bigger, something wilder. The sea called to me, as some do, and once I answered it, I never looked back. I am not a tough guy. I like my work steady, my coffee strong, my shoes broken in. I didn't use umbrellas or crowded offices with bright lights. I've always preferred the outdoors, the sound of waves against steel, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'm part of something bigger. Running an oil rig isn't a glamorous job, but it's an honest one. It requires discipline, fortitude, and a willingness to take on whatever the ocean decides to throw your way. And believe me, it has its own temperament. I've spent most of my life here, watching the sun rise and set over endless waters. I'm okay with faking routine. There's comfort in the predictability of the shifts, the rhythm of the technical inspections, the din of the cars. But there's also a flip side. The isolation can wear on a man, the silence can be heavy. You have to learn to ride it without letting it break you. Not everyone can. Now, about Rig 32. It's a massive thing, a metal island in the middle of nowhere. Officially, we're in the South Seas, though our exact location varies depending on currents and company demands. The rig has seen its share of storms and weathered them all. This is what it was built for. The men and women who work here? Well, some of them. Some of them, not so much. The crew changes frequently. Some last a few months, others a few weeks. Turnover is high, but I guess that's to be expected. Life here isn't for everyone. The work is grueling, the weather is unpredictable, and the ocean is as beautiful as it is unforgiving. You'd better remember that. When you arrive, you'll be given a silver pin. It's small, round, and engraved, resembling a sea monster. And you have to wear it all the time, without exception. Most newbies don't think much of it. They think it's some kind of company tradition or a way to identify workers in case of an emergency. That's partly true, but there's more to it. You'll soon find out. The device works in a strange way. First, none of us know exactly who it belongs to. Sure, there's a name on the paycheck, but that's a public contract, nothing to track. Before you start, you sign a non-disclosure agreement. Standard stuff, but the rules that follow? They're not written down. You'll hear them from veterans, piece by piece, until they become second nature. That's why I'm writing this guide, to fill in the gaps and tell you what's not covered in the safety manuals. This is no place for careless mistakes. People have been lost here, some in the waves, others in ways we don't talk about. There are forces at work in the South Seas that defy logic and reason. I've seen things I can't explain and heard stories from men I trust that would make your hair stand on end. But I'm moving forward. Before I get into all of this, let me start slow. After all, you're new here. Take it one step at a time and you might just find your footing. Living on a false illusion is hard, but it's honest work. There's something joyful about it, though most people would never know it. Here you live by routine. You wake up at the same time every day, get dressed, and go about your business. Some days you're in the engine room, checking gauges and making sure nothing's blown up. Other days you're up there pulling bolts or cleaning debris off the deck. It's physical, demanding work, and at the end of the day your muscles ache and your clothes smell of salt and oil. But there's a kind of satisfaction in it that you can't get anywhere else. The food helps, too. I've worked in facilities where the cafeteria served gray plates that could be used for dog food, but not here. At Rig 32, the food is hot and the coffee tastes really good. The beans are from Colombia. I don't know who pays for that luxury, but I won't complain. It's bacon every morning. Crispy, greasy, the kind that makes your mouth water while you wait in line. Friday is pizza night, and they don't skimp on the toppings either. It's the little things like that that keep the spirits up. This is where you learn to appreciate the little things. Sunsets are another gift. No matter how harsh the day, when the sun dips below the horizon and paints the sky streaks of orange and pink, you can't help but stop and watch. The sea turns into a shimmering layer of gold, and for a moment, the platform doesn't feel cold and industrial. It feels alive. Now the machine itself is noisy. It's the constant whirring of machinery, the squeaking of metal on metal, the occasional puff of steam. At first it can drive you crazy, especially when you're trying to sleep. Most of us wear headphones to block it out, but after a while you get used to it. The noise becomes part of the background, like a clock ticking or a refrigerator humming. You stop noticing it until it's gone. But you didn't come here to read bacon or sunsets, did you? You came here for the stories, and I have plenty of them. Some of you may not believe me. God, I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But it is important, and if you are smart you will remember it. Here, the ocean does not just accept you, it will taste you. And sometimes it will show you things that do not interest you. Let's start small. A fish. Every now and then, fish wash up on the surface of the equipment. At first glance, they do not look like anything. Black scales, slim body, the kind of fish you'd find at any fishing harbor. But you must leave them alone. Don't touch them or try to keep them as trophy. If you find one in your nets, throw it back into the water as soon as possible. I can't stress this enough. As you can see, this fish is not normal. Not even close. It looks fine from the outside, but if you're curious or stupid enough to open your mouth, you'll see something that will stay with you forever. Teeth. Not sharp, jagged teeth like a shark or a piranha. No, these fish have human teeth. Straight, a little yellow, but definitely human. I've seen a lot of weird stuff in my time, but there's something about those teeth that makes my skin crawl. One newbie decided to keep one once. He thought it was funny. Look at that, he said, picking it up like a trophy. We told him to throw it back, but he just laughed. Later that night we heard her scream. When we found him, he was leaning against the corner of the bed, muttering nonsense and holding his arm like it was on fire. He didn't last long after that. Nobody ever does that. Then there are the salt statues. You don't see them until after the storm. I'm not talking about pouring rain, I mean the kind of storm where the waves are so high they crash into the ship as if trying to sink it. On nights like this, everyone stays inside. You can't go on deck unless you want to die. The wind howls, the rain pours, and the whole field shakes under its force. It's a reminder of how small we are here, just a piece of metal in a vast, angry ocean. But when the storm passes and the sea calms down, that's when you see them. Salt sculptures. They're not always in the same place, but they're always there. The figures standing on the deck of the ship, made entirely of salt, seem to have been sculpted by the waves themselves. At first you might think it's just a trick of the light, or maybe some kind of erosion. But then you notice the details. Hands, feet, torsos, faces. Human faces. These are the faces that reach out to you. They are extremely detailed, right down to the wrinkles in the skin and the crinkles around the eyes. But these are the ones that really stick with you. They are always open, as if they are screaming. Some of the figures have their arms outstretched as if they are reaching out to something or someone. It's as if they're frozen in their final moments, whatever those moments may be. We don't touch them. We don't talk about them. And in the afternoon, they usually disappear, falling back into the sea or being blown away by the wind. But they always return, after the next storm or the one after that. I've asked myself 100 times where they came from and I've never found an answer. Maybe it's better this way. So if you're out on deck one morning after a storm and you see one of these, don't hang around. Take it as a warning, a reminder of what the ocean can do. It gives you, it takes away, and sometimes it leaves you with things you never thought possible. That's enough for now. There's a lot to say, but it will take some time to sink in. Living on a drilling rig may seem routine at first, but it won't take long for a stranger and inexplicable person to find you. And when that happens, you better be prepared. The ocean is full of strange things, things I'll never understand. I don't have the answers to everything, most of them, but I've seen enough to know this: the less you care, the safer you are. I write this because beginners should know. I have come to a place where the rules of the universe do not always apply. The sea is as old as time, and there is more to it than we can hope to comprehend. There are nights here when the water is like liquid tar. No light penetrates it and it stretches like a vast, endless pool of oil. But just when you think it can't get any darker, you see something that catches your eye: the stars. Tiny specks of light reflect off the surface, lighting up the rest of the sky. Sure, it's pretty, but it doesn't make any sense. When you're far from shore and have only the anchor lights to break the darkness, you learn to question beauty that way. One of the scariest nights of my life occurred when I was still new to forging. It was 40 years ago when I was green, excited, and perhaps a little too bold for my own good. I had just finished my shift and decided to go up to the observation deck for a smoke. It was a quiet night, I thought. The air was heavy with the prospect of a storm, and the clouds were thick enough to show the last trace of the moon or stars. I leaned against the railing, lit a cigarette, and took a long drag. The ocean was as black as I had ever seen it, but after a while I noticed something strange. Tiny dots of light were scattered across the water below me. At first I thought they were reflections from the lights on the device, but they didn't make sense. They didn't move with the waves like reflections. They stood motionless, fixed to the ground, like stars on a black canvas. I watched, fascinated, until a terrible thought occurred to me. The sky above me was completely covered in storm clouds. There were no stars to reflect them. That's when I realized they weren't stars at all. They were eyes. Dozens of them, maybe more, looking up at me from the water. My stomach dropped and the cigarette fell from my fingers. I don't remember much after that, just the sound of my boots hitting metal as I stepped inside. It took me months to even get out on deck after dark. Even now, after all these years, I avoid looking out into the water too much. You never know what's beyond. And that wasn't the last strange thing I saw here. Far away, the ocean has a way of showing you what's inside you, no matter how hard you try to forget it. The one thing I can't shake is the ship. Everyone knows it, even if they don't talk about it. It only shows up on stormy nights. You're on deck, scrambling to secure gear or make sure everything is stable, and then you see it, a huge ship in the distance. It looks like something out of a history book, with big tattered sails and a wooden hull so overgrown with brush that it's hard to tell where the forest ends and the sea begins. The thing moves through the water like a ghost, silent and smooth, no matter how rough the waves. And you never see anyone on board. Not a soul. When I first saw it, I thought it was some kind of mirage. Maybe I had been in the sun too long, or maybe the pressure of the storm was getting to me. But when I looked around, I saw the same expression on the faces of the men beside me. They had seen it, too. We haven't said a word. Nobody ever does. But we're all thinking the same thing, it's Davy Jones. You've probably heard the legend of Davy Jones, but if you haven't, let me fill you in. He's said to be the captain of the Flying Dutchman, cursed to sail the seas forever. Some stories say he was a greedy sailor who betrayed his crew in order to get his hands on treasure. Others say he is a man who fell in love with the sea itself and made a pact with the devil to stay there forever. Whichever version you believe, the story always ends the same way: Davy Jones is doomed, as are those who cross his path. He has been feared by sailors for centuries. They say he collects the souls of those who died at sea and drags them to a vault at the bottom of the ocean. When you're surrounded by nothing but water, old stories seem more real. They're the kind of stories that come to life. So when that ship passes, you don't call it. You don't screw it up, and you certainly don't try to abandon it. You've put in the work, you've done your job, and you hope it keeps going. It always does. There's one rule on Rig 32 that you should understand better than any other: never enter through the red basement door. You may not even see it while you're here. It's not always, but when it happens, you'll know. It's a heavy red door at the bottom of the basement unit, near the stairs that lead to the storage room. You could drive past this place 100 times and never see it, but one day it'll be there. No one knows why. No one knows who built it or why it comes and goes this way. If you see this, do yourself a favor, turn around and walk away. Don't touch the handle. Don't even stop and look. The longer you stay in a place, the more curious you become, and on Rig 32, curiosity is the thing that will kill you. The last person to ignore this rule didn't regret it. His name was Marco. He was a welder, a nice guy, always joking and quick with his hands. He had been on the platform for about 6 months when he came across the door. I don't know what made it open, but it did. He didn't tell anyone, he just walked in during his shift and never came back. We looked everywhere for him, tore up chairs, but he was gone. A few weeks later, during a storm, his body washed up on the deck. It was the first and only time I had ever seen anything like it. The sea doesn't give back what it needs, not usually. But there he was, lying on the deck, cold as the metal beneath him. I didn't always play by the rules, though. When I was young and new, I had a wave of rebellion. I didn't like being told what I could and couldn't do, especially when no one gave me a reason for doing it. So one night, when the door opened during my shift, I decided to see for myself what was on the other side. It was stupid. I knew it even as I turned the handle and kept walking. The door was heavy and creaked as soon as it opened. Beyond that was a metal staircase that descended deeper than I had thought possible. With each step the air grew colder, and the sound of the machinery faded to a dull hum. When I reached the bottom, I found myself in a strange, cramped room. The walls were steel, smooth with condensation, and the floor was uneven, as if tilted by the pressure of the water around it. The entire room was cavernous, with a large circular window taking up most of one wall. From this window, I could see the ocean, dark, vast, and endless. There were no other doors, no signs of any purpose in the room. Just a red door at the back and a window that looked deep. I didn't stay long. The longer I stood there, the more I felt like I didn't belong. I went up the stairs, closed the door behind me, and never looked back. The next day the door was gone. I have only seen it a few times since then, and each time I have given it a wide berth. I don't know what would have happened if I had stayed longer, or worse, if the door had disappeared while I was still inside. Here's the thing, you can't trust it to stay put. It comes and goes on its own terms, and you don't want to get on its bad side when it's gone. I don't know why there's a door. I don't know who built this room or why it's there. Maybe it's part of the device's original design, something left over from a time when people didn't ask so many questions. Or maybe it's something else that doesn't belong in this world. Whatever it is, it's beyond our comprehension. All we can do is stay out of the way. If you're not lucky enough to encounter it while you're here, remember this: leave it alone. Don't go inside. And then there's the captain's quarters. No, not for me. It belonged to the captain before me. The room has been empty for years and no one has been in it. It's not locked, if you want to open the door, but no one does. It's also a beautiful space, larger than the usual cabins, with a desk, a window overlooking the ocean, and a bed more comfortable than any in the group. But it was left alone, untouched, like a museum exhibit cut off from the rest of the world. The thing is, the old captain had disappeared. Just like that. One day he was here, standing in line as usual, and the next he wasn't. There was no warning, no farewell, no sign of the battle. He was just gone. The crew searched high and low, breaking every inch of the apparatus, but they couldn't find a trace. That was decades ago. His disappearance remains a mystery, one of many on Rig 32. I asked around, I tried to find out what happened from the men who were here at the time, but no one knew, or if they did, they wouldn't tell me. All they told me was that he was a good leader, fair and hardworking, a leader that people respected. And then, one day, he was gone. The room now remains empty, not out of prejudice, but out of respect. At least that's what the crew says. But that's not the strangest part. On quiet nights, when the sea is calm and the equipment is quiet, some crew members say they've seen a man in a yellow coat step out onto the observation deck. He always stands by the railing, smoking a cigarette. If you get close enough, you'll see he's wearing a silver pin, the same one that every worker here gets when they start work. When I first heard about it, I thought it was a joke. A ghost story told to scare newcomers. But then I saw it for myself. It was a calm night, the sea like glass and the stars stretching out forever. I went up to the observation deck to have a smoke, as I always do after my shift. At first I thought I was alone, but then I saw a man in a yellow jacket standing towards me, looking into the water. I don't know why, but I nodded and said, "Good evening." He turned his head slightly, just so I could see the outline of his face in the dim light. He didn't say anything, just nodded and took another drag on his cigarette. I stood there for a minute, not knowing what to do, and then left. After that I didn't go back on deck for 3 days. That's the rule. If you see him, always say something, acknowledge him, be polite, but don't hesitate. Don't push your luck. And whatever you do, don't go back on deck for a few days. The crew says it's safer this way. Some think the man in the yellow vest is an old captain still monitoring the instruments in his own way. Others think it's something else, something sent by the ocean to remind us where we are. Whatever it is, sometimes people disappear after seeing it. Not often, but enough to notice. This is Marco, the welder who disappeared after the red door. He had a group called Vic in front of him who ignored the 3-day rule. He returned to the observation deck the next night and left in the morning. No one knows what happened to them. I left my coffee cup on the deck when I saw it. It's nothing fancy, just the same stuff we drink in the cafeteria, but it feels right. My parents weren't religious, but they always taught me to respect what I didn't understand. Coffee is my way of doing that, a kind of offering, I guess. I don't know if it'll take or not, the glass is always empty when I check, but it could be the wind or the sea spray. Still, it makes me feel better. I've only seen him a few times over the years and he's the same every time. He doesn't talk, he doesn't move, he just stands there with a cigarette and stares into the water, as if he's waiting for something. Or someone. If you're smart, you'll follow the rules. If you see him, nod, say good evening, maybe ask him a question if you're feeling brave. He won't answer, but that's not the point. It's about showing respect. After all, if he's the old captain, he's got a lot going for him. That's all I can say about the man in the yellow vest. You decide for yourself what to believe. And finally, there are the badges. Every Rig 13 crew member gets one when they board. It's about the size of a silver dollar, made of some kind of polished metal that won't tarnish no matter how many storms it gets through. The company logo is engraved so it catches the light. Officially, the badges are just company identifiers. They allow you to identify yourself, log in and out, and access certain areas of the device. But like so much else here, there's more than meets the eye. Badges are also keys. Certain badges open doors that aren't in any of the drawings, hidden doors in the basement where the device is submerged in water. These aren't your average tech rooms or storage areas. Nobody talks about what's behind those doors, and I don't think anybody really wants to know. There's something about them that knocks your courage, even as you're moving forward. And then there's what's underneath the machine. We don't know what it is, only that it's great. Greater than the forgery itself. It's not violent, not by a long shot, anyway, but it's there. Sometimes when the engine makes a rattling noise, I can't tell if it's the engine revving or something deep inside making a low, rumbling sound. Whatever it is, you don't want to get too close. And you don't want to be noticed. That's why we wear badges. They protect us. At least, we think so. But badges do more than just protect us from what's out there. They also act as lifeguards. If you ever find yourself in a storm, and trust me, you don't want to be in that water for long, a badge is your only chance of survival. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's something you'll never forget. I've only seen it once, about 10 years ago. It was one of the worst storms I've ever experienced. The waves were up and hitting the equipment hard enough to shake it. The wind was deafening, and the rain was falling in sheets so thick you could barely see your hand in front of your face. We were all tangled up trying to secure the equipment when one of the beginners lost his footing. He had gone over the wall and was in the water like this. The waves were violent and tossed her like a doll. We screamed, we threw ropes, we tried everything, but the current was too strong. Then, as we were looking, there appeared dozens of those eyes I told you about. They broke the surface of the water. Then something else appeared from the depths, a mouth. It was huge, half the width of the vessel and circular. It was not full of sharp, jagged teeth as you would expect from a sea monster. These were human teeth. Rows and rows of them, straight and yellow, like the fish one sometimes finds on the deck of a ship. The mouth began to suck in water, forming a whirlpool that pulled everything towards it. The newcomer was doomed. We saw it in his face as he struggled with the current, his scream drowned out by the roar of the storm. He was clutching his badge tightly, and that's when it happened. The beacon started turning on the light that cut through the chaos like a beacon. Seaweed appeared out of nowhere. He rose from the water like a figure from a dream, or a nightmare, depending on how you saw him. He looked like a horse, but his mane was made of seaweed and his eyes were shining. The newcomer didn't hesitate. He grabbed Kelpia by the neck and held on for dear life as he fought the whirlpool. The strength of the seaweed was unreal and he managed to pull her out of the current and back toward the drilling platform. We stood there, arms outstretched, and when the kelp came close enough, we pulled it onto the deck. The kelp didn't hesitate. Once the newcomer was safe, it disappeared beneath the waves, along with the kraken and its terrifying mouth. The storm subsided not long after, as the force that had been unleashed was satisfied and retreated into the depths. This is the only time I've seen something like this, but it's not the only story. Part of the crew says you can throw your badge into the water and make a bed of sorts. You ask for help and if you like what's below it will respond. But you don't know what you'll get, or if you'll get anything at all. It's a gamble, and I wouldn't recommend taking it lightly. What I do know is this: you don't want to lose your badge. Keep it close. Wear it at all times. It's more than just a piece of metal with a company logo on it. It's your protection, your lifeline, your connection to the forces that sustain this device. And out here, where the ocean stretches endlessly in all directions, sometimes that's all you have. This is the last story I'll tell you. If you're reading this, you're probably already on the couch, sitting in your closet, adjusting to the constant hum of appliances and the smell of salt in the air. You'll probably never see a red door, a man in a yellow jacket, or seaweed. Your time here will probably be nothing more than routine changes, warm coffee, and Friday pizza nights. If so, consider yourself lucky. But if you see all this, if you hear some enormous groaning beneath you or see glowing eyes on the surface of the water, remember what I told you. The ocean is beautiful, yes, but it is also vast and ancient and full of mysteries we will never fully understand. Respect it, follow the rules and keep your badge. Good luck.
And so, the story ends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell button to receive all the stories. Like, share and rate the story in a comment. Thank you for watching.